Most people spend their entire lives searching for the kingdom of God in all the wrong places. They look to churches, to heaven after death, to distant spiritual realms. They pray desperately for God to bring the kingdom into their circumstances. But Joel Goldsmith discovered something that changes everything. The kingdom isn't coming someday. It isn't somewhere else waiting to arrive. It's already here, within you, right now, this very moment. What happens when you truly grasp this truth? Your entire relationship with life transforms instantly. You stop begging an external God for help. You stop waiting for miracles to arrive from outside. You stop feeling like a powerless human hoping God notices your prayers. Instead, you recognize the infinite spiritual reality that already exists as your true nature. This isn't religious theory or philosophical speculation. It's mystical fact that Joel proved thousands of times. Joel taught that the kingdom of God is consciousness itself, not your human thoughts or emotions, not your beliefs or your religious practices, but the divine awareness that witnesses everything in your experience. The very consciousness reading these words right now is the kingdom. When you understand this deeply, something remarkable begins happening. Your problems don't get solved from outside through divine intervention. They dissolve because you see through the illusion that created them. The transformation isn't gradual improvement. It's a complete shift in identity. You discover you're not a limited human seeking God. You are consciousness itself, which is God expressing individually as you. Every single thing you've been searching for already exists in the kingdom that you are. This is what Joel dedicated his life to revealing. Let me share exactly what Joel meant by consciousness being the kingdom. Right now, there's an awareness in you that knows you're listening to these words. That awareness isn't your body. Your body is what that awareness witnesses. That awareness isn't your mind or your thoughts. It's what witnesses your mind thinking. This eternal witness, this pure awareness, is what mystics call Christ consciousness or Buddha nature. This is the kingdom. When Jesus said the kingdom is within, he wasn't speaking metaphorically or symbolically. He meant literally within your consciousness right now, not hidden in your heart organ, not stored in your brain somewhere, within the very awareness that's experiencing this sentence at this moment. That awareness is completely untouched by your problems. It's unlimited by circumstances. It's already whole, already perfect, already complete. Most people never notice this awareness because they're completely hypnotized by thoughts and circumstances. They live exclusively in the kingdom of effects, where problems seem absolutely real and separate from God, where healing must come from outside, where supply depends on economic conditions. But the moment you recognize consciousness itself as divine presence, you've found the kingdom. And everything changes from that single recognition. Joel spent decades helping people make this shift, not through complicated rituals or long spiritual practices, simply through recognition. The kingdom isn't achieved, it's recognized. And that recognition transforms everything about how you experience life, relationships, health, finances, and every challenge you face. Here's what Joel discovered through decades of spiritual healing work with thousands of people. When you realize the kingdom is already established within consciousness, you stop trying to change conditions. You stop fighting battles in the external world. You stop begging God to fix your circumstances. Instead, you rest in the kingdom that already is, perfect and complete, and watch circumstances naturally align with that inner reality. This sounds incredibly simple, but it requires a complete reversal of how you've been taught to live your entire life. You've been conditioned to fix problems, to make things happen through effort, to struggle and strive for improvement. The kingdom operates on completely different principles. It's already perfect. It's already complete. It's already expressing infinite good, unlimited supply, perfect health, and divine harmony in every area. Your job isn't to create the kingdom. Your job isn't to bring it into manifestation. Your job isn't even to make it real. Your only job is to recognize it, to acknowledge what already is. Joel called this recognition prayer, not asking God to do something for you, not visualizing outcomes or affirming prosperity, simply recognizing the divine reality that already exists as your consciousness right now. When you do this consistently, something Joel proved thousands of times happens. The external world begins reflecting the perfection that's always been present in the kingdom within you. Not through magic, not through wishful thinking, through spiritual law as exact as mathematical law. Consciousness recognized becomes consciousness expressed. Think about what this means practically in your life. You have a health challenge right now. The human approach is to pray desperately for healing, to ask God to please fix your body. But kingdom consciousness recognizes that in spiritual reality, in consciousness itself, you're already whole. Disease exists only in the world of material appearances, not in the kingdom of infinite life that is your true nature. When you rest in that recognition, not denying the appearance but seeing through it to the greater reality, something profound shifts. The body begins aligning with the truth you're recognizing. This isn't positive thinking trying to override negative thinking. It's not mind over matter. It's consciousness recognizing itself as the only power, the only presence, the only reality. And what consciousness recognizes, consciousness expresses. Joel proved this thousands upon thousands of times throughout his healing ministry. Cancers disappeared when people recognized kingdom consciousness. Supposedly incurable conditions vanished. Businesses on the brink of bankruptcy transformed into prosperity. Broken relationships healed completely. Not because Joel begged God for miracles, not because he had special powers others don't possess, but because he recognized the kingdom where those problems never existed in the first place. This is what happens when you truly understand what the kingdom is. You stop living from the outside in, where circumstances dictate your inner state. You start living from the inside out, where kingdom consciousness expresses itself as your daily experience. And the transformation is undeniable. Let me tell you about Margaret, a woman who attended Joel's classes in San Francisco in the 1950s. She had been diagnosed with a supposedly incurable degenerative condition. Multiple doctors confirmed the diagnosis. They gave her perhaps 6 months to live, possibly less. She tried everything medical science offered. She prayed desperately every single day. She begged God for healing. Nothing changed. The condition progressed exactly as doctors predicted. She was losing all hope when someone brought her to hear Joel speak at one of his Wednesday evening classes. Joel didn't pray for her healing that night. He didn't even focus on her disease or give her special attention. Instead, he taught the entire class about the kingdom within. He explained that in consciousness, in spiritual reality, disease has no existence whatsoever. Not because we deny it or pretend it away, but because the kingdom knows only wholeness and perfect life. Margaret was skeptical at first. How could ignoring her very real symptoms possibly help? But Joel explained she wasn't ignoring symptoms. She was recognizing something greater than symptoms, something more real than disease. She was recognizing the kingdom of divine consciousness as her true nature, where disease never existed and never could exist. Margaret spent the next 3 weeks doing nothing but this recognition. Every single time fear arose about her condition, she returned to kingdom consciousness. Every time symptoms appeared or intensified, she acknowledged them but recognized the greater reality within. She wasn't fighting disease. She wasn't trying to overcome it through willpower. She was simply resting in the kingdom that knows no disease. After 6 weeks of this practice, Margaret returned to her doctors for scheduled tests. They ran the tests 3 times because they couldn't believe the results. They found absolutely no trace of the condition that had been so clearly documented before. They called it spontaneous remission, a medical mystery. Joel called it recognition of what already is in kingdom consciousness. The disease had never existed in reality. It existed only in the world of material appearances. Margaret lived another 32 years after that diagnosis. She never experienced a return of the condition. But more importantly, she spent those 3 decades teaching others about the kingdom within consciousness. She understood that what happened to her wasn't a personal miracle. It was spiritual law operating exactly as it always operates when we recognize truth. Now let me share Robert's story. He was a businessman facing complete bankruptcy in the early 1960s. His company was 3 months behind on every payment. Creditors were threatening lawsuits. He had tried every business strategy known. He worked 16-hour days, trying to save his company. He prayed constantly for God to please send customers and money. His situation only worsened, despite all his desperate efforts. In absolute desperation, he attended one of Joel's intensive week-long workshops on kingdom consciousness in Hawaii. Joel told him something that seemed completely revolutionary and frankly impossible. Stop trying to demonstrate supply. Stop trying to make your business succeed through human effort. Instead, recognize that the kingdom already is infinite abundance. Not abundance coming to you someday if you're good enough, but abundance is the very nature of consciousness itself right now. This completely confused Robert at first. How could recognizing some invisible spiritual reality possibly help his very real business problems? Joel explained it this way. In the kingdom, there's no such thing as lack. Lack exists only in the world of human belief and human effort. When you recognize kingdom consciousness as your true nature, that recognition begins expressing itself as whatever form is needed. Sometimes that's business success. Sometimes it's a completely new direction you never imagined. Robert decided he had nothing to lose. He stopped all the desperate struggling and striving. He spent 2 hours every single day just recognizing the kingdom within, not asking for anything, not trying to fix anything, not outlining how God should solve his problems. Just pure recognition of consciousness as infinite abundance already present. Within 3 months, opportunities appeared that he never could have planned or forced into existence. A former colleague contacted him about a merger opportunity. New clients appeared seemingly out of nowhere. The business didn't just survive. It transformed into something far more successful than it had been before the crisis. But more importantly, Robert was completely free from the tyranny of depending on external conditions for his inner peace. Here's what these transformation stories reveal. The kingdom isn't a reward for good behavior. It isn't something you achieve after years of spiritual practice or moral perfection. It's the already present reality of consciousness itself right now. Every problem you experience exists only because you're looking at life from outside the kingdom, from the perspective of human limitation and separation from God. Joel taught that we live in 2 worlds simultaneously. The kingdom of divine consciousness, where everything is already perfect, already provided, already healed, already abundant. And the kingdom of human beliefs, where problems seem absolutely real and completely separate from God. Most people spend their entire lives trapped in that second kingdom, never discovering the first one that's been within them all along. But you don't have to leave one kingdom to enter the other. You don't have to go anywhere or become someone different. You're already in the kingdom right now. You've always been in the kingdom. You just haven't recognized it clearly. The moment you do recognize it, even for an instant, you experience what Joel called the shock of recognition. Life itself hasn't changed, but your perception of life has changed absolutely everything. The transformation happens gradually for most people. You have a powerful moment of kingdom recognition, then you forget and fall back into human thinking and worry. That's completely natural and normal. Joel worked with this understanding for decades before it became permanent and automatic in his consciousness. The key is simply returning to kingdom recognition again and again without judgment or discouragement. Each time you return to recognizing the kingdom, it becomes easier and more natural. Each time you recognize consciousness as divine presence, that recognition deepens and strengthens. You begin noticing synchronicities everywhere, what Joel called signs of the kingdom expressing itself in visible form. Challenges still appear in your experience, but they don't have the same power over you anymore because you know the greater reality that's always present. This is what happens when you truly understand the kingdom. You stop living from the outside in, where circumstances dictate your peace and joy. You start living from the inside out, where kingdom consciousness expresses itself as your daily experience. Not perfectly from day one, not instantly and completely, but progressively, consistently, and undeniably over time. If these kingdom revelations are expanding your spiritual understanding right now, like this video to help others discover Joel's life-changing teachings, subscribe for deeper mystical Christianity wisdom every week, and comment which insight resonated most powerfully with your own spiritual journey. Joel gave us extremely practical tools for recognizing the kingdom throughout your daily life. The first technique he taught is what he called the practice of the presence. Throughout your day, in the middle of ordinary activities, pause for just a moment and notice the awareness that's witnessing your experiences. That awareness witnessing everything is kingdom consciousness. You're not thinking about it intellectually. You're directly experiencing it as your true nature. When you're stuck in traffic feeling frustrated instead of staying lost in frustration, recognize the kingdom. When you're facing a difficult conversation that creates anxiety, before speaking, pause and recognize the kingdom. When fear suddenly arises about money or health or relationships, stop and recognize the consciousness that witnesses the fear arising. That consciousness is completely untouched by what it witnesses. It's not afraid. It can't be afraid. This isn't escaping from reality or denying what's happening. It's recognizing true reality underneath appearances. The kingdom is infinitely more real than circumstances could ever be. As you practice this consistent recognition throughout your days and weeks, something remarkable happens that Joel proved countless times. The circumstances begin naturally conforming to the kingdom reality you're recognizing, not through force or manipulation, not through you trying to make things happen, but through spiritual law operating as precisely as gravity or mathematics. What consciousness recognizes, consciousness expresses. When you recognize the kingdom within, the kingdom begins expressing itself as harmony in your visible circumstances. This is spiritual law Joel dedicated his entire life to proving and teaching. Another powerful technique Joel taught is what he called releasing mental arguments. Most people constantly argue with reality inside their minds. They mentally rehearse difficult conversations before they happen. They worry obsessively about possible negative outcomes. They replay problems over and over. These mental arguments keep you completely locked out of kingdom consciousness because they continuously affirm the reality and power of the problem. Kingdom recognition requires stopping these mental arguments entirely. When you catch yourself mentally fighting with circumstances, just stop. Don't try to replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts instead. That's still staying in the mental realm. Simply return to the pure awareness of consciousness itself, watching the thoughts. The kingdom doesn't argue with appearances ever. It simply knows its own reality completely. Joel discovered through years of observation that most human suffering comes not from actual circumstances, but from our endless mental commentary about circumstances. A bill arrives in the mail. That's simply a fact. But the mental storm about the bill, the worry about paying it, the fear about what it means, the imagined catastrophes it might lead to, that's what creates suffering. The kingdom remains perfectly peaceful regardless of facts. When you stop arguing mentally and rest in kingdom consciousness, you're not denying the bill exists. You're recognizing something infinitely greater than the bill. And from that recognition of the kingdom, divine wisdom naturally arises about how to respond appropriately, not from fear or external pressure, but from the infinite intelligence that is the kingdom itself expressing as your consciousness. Joel also emphasized what he called recognizing spiritual identity. This is crucial for understanding the kingdom. You're not a limited human being trying desperately to reach God somewhere outside yourself. Your consciousness itself, which is God expressing individually and uniquely as you. The kingdom isn't something you possess like an object. You are the kingdom expressing itself in unique form right now. This single recognition changes absolutely everything about prayer and spiritual practice. You're not asking an external God somewhere in heaven to please intervene in your life down here. You're recognizing that consciousness, which is God, is already your life right now. The kingdom isn't somehow running your life from outside. The kingdom is your life itself when you recognize it as such. Think about it this way that Joel often used. A wave isn't separate from the ocean desperately trying to become ocean. The wave is already ocean expressing itself as wave. You're not separate from the kingdom trying to enter it someday. Your kingdom consciousness already expressing itself as your individual experience. The very moment you recognize this clearly, the painful sense of separation dissolves completely. Joel called this the great secret of mystical Christianity that most churches completely missed. Jesus wasn't teaching people how to get to heaven someday after they die. He was revealing that heaven, the kingdom, is the present reality of consciousness itself right now. And when you recognize this truth, even while appearing in human form on earth, you live in heaven now, not someday, now. Here's a specific daily practice Joel recommended to thousands of students. Set aside 15 minutes twice daily, morning and evening, not to pray for things you want, not to visualize outcomes or affirm prosperity statements, simply to recognize the kingdom. Sit quietly and notice the consciousness that's aware of your breathing, aware of your thoughts arising, aware of your body sitting there. That consciousness is the kingdom itself. As you rest in this pure awareness, thoughts will inevitably come. Let them come and go naturally. Circumstances and problems will intrude on your mind. That's completely natural. But keep gently returning to the awareness itself, the consciousness witnessing everything. This is what Joel meant by recognition prayer. You're not trying to achieve anything or become anything different. You're simply recognizing what already is right now. Joel made this promise repeatedly. If you do this practice consistently for 30 days without missing, you will absolutely begin noticing changes. Not because you've created changes through mental effort, but because kingdom consciousness naturally expresses itself as harmony in your experience when you recognize it regularly. Some changes will be internal, profound shifts in how you perceive and experience life. Others will be external, circumstances aligning differently than before. The key is absolute consistency without expectation of specific results. You're not practicing kingdom recognition to get things. You're practicing it simply because it's true. The kingdom is the reality right now, regardless of appearances. When you recognize truth purely for its own sake without ulterior motives, truth automatically transforms your experience. That spiritual law Joel proved thousands upon thousands of times throughout his ministry. Now let's address honestly the challenges you will definitely face in recognizing the kingdom. The biggest obstacle to kingdom consciousness is what Joel called the hypnosis of appearances. Your physical senses report problems as absolutely real. Your bank account shows specific lack. Your body signals disease through symptoms. These material appearances seem infinitely more real than some invisible spiritual reality you can't see or touch. Joel called this the universal hypnosis affecting all humanity. We're all conditioned from birth to believe that the material world is the only reality, and that consciousness is somehow secondary or dependent on material conditions. Kingdom understanding completely reverses this fundamental assumption. Consciousness is reality. Consciousness is cause. Material appearances are effects of consciousness, not causes of anything. But you can't just intellectually believe this reversal. Your entire nervous system, your whole lifetime of conditioning, screams constantly that the problem is real and solid, and God is the abstraction. This is why kingdom recognition requires tremendous patience and persistence. You're literally deprogramming decades of hypnotic conditioning, not just learning a new spiritual concept or technique. Joel was completely honest about this. He told students it took him years of consistent practice before kingdom consciousness became his automatic response instead of human reaction. But he also promised that every single moment spent in kingdom recognition weakens the hypnosis and strengthens your awareness of truth. Progress is absolutely inevitable if you persist. Another major challenge is what Joel called taking thought. The human mind desperately wants to figure out how God will solve the problem. You recognize the kingdom for a moment, feel peaceful, then immediately start mentally planning how circumstances will change. You begin outlining what God should do. This mental planning takes you right back out of kingdom consciousness into human strategizing and control. The kingdom operates entirely by grace, never by human planning or control. When you recognize consciousness as the kingdom, divine intelligence already knows perfectly what needs to happen. Your mental strategies and plans actually interfere with grace flowing naturally. Joel discovered that the less he tried to outline how healing should occur, the more freely and perfectly it happened beyond anything he could have planned. This requires tremendous trust that most people find extremely difficult. You must recognize the kingdom clearly and then wait, not passively, but actively resting in that recognition while remaining alert. Joel called it watchfulness. You're not anxiously waiting for results to appear. You're watching carefully to keep your recognition of the kingdom clear and undistracted by appearances and fear. Most people give up right here at this crucial point. They recognize the kingdom faithfully for a few days or weeks, see no immediate external changes, and conclude it doesn't work for them. But Joel taught that kingdom recognition always works, operating on its own timetable. Sometimes results appear instantly. Often they come gradually. but they always come when you persist in recognition without forcing outcomes. There's also the challenge of intense emotional resistance. Kingdom consciousness can feel completely impractical and useless when you're genuinely terrified about money or devastated by relationship loss. Your emotions scream for immediate action, immediate solutions, immediate relief. The quiet recognition of spiritual reality seems weak and ineffective compared to emotional urgency. Joel acknowledged this challenge completely and never minimized human pain or emotion. But he discovered something absolutely crucial through his own experience and working with thousands of people. Emotions are not enemies of kingdom consciousness. They're simply energy moving through consciousness. When you recognize the kingdom while simultaneously feeling fear, something remarkable happens. The fear loses its power to dictate your actions and decisions. You're not suppressing emotion or pretending to be spiritual while secretly terrified inside. You're feeling the fear fully and completely, while simultaneously recognizing the consciousness that witnesses fear arising. That consciousness, the kingdom, isn't afraid. It can't be afraid. Fear appears in it exactly like clouds appear in sky, but the sky remains completely untouched by clouds. This dual awareness, feeling human emotion while recognizing divine consciousness, is what Joel called living in the kingdom while appearing in the world. You don't deny human experience or pretend it doesn't exist. You recognize something infinitely greater than human experience as your true nature. And that recognition transforms how you respond to emotion rather than react from emotion. Joel also warned seriously about spiritual ambition. Many people approach kingdom consciousness as a technique to get what they want. They recognize the kingdom hoping to manifest supply or healing or relationship success. This subtle using of spirituality for human purposes keeps you completely locked out of the kingdom's transformative power. The kingdom is not a tool for human improvement or achievement. It's a complete shift in identity. You're not a human using kingdom consciousness to get things. Your kingdom consciousness appearing temporarily in human form. When you recognize this accurately without mental manipulation, human desires begin dissolving into divine purpose. You still have preferences and goals, but they're not desperate attempts to complete an incomplete self. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of kingdom understanding that Joel emphasized. He spent years discovering that every single time he approached consciousness as a means to an end, absolutely nothing happened. But when he recognized consciousness simply because it was truth, with no ulterior motive, profound transformations followed naturally and effortlessly. You must examine your own motives honestly. Are you recognizing the kingdom to get healing or money or success? Or are you recognizing it because it's true regardless of outcomes? This distinction seems subtle, but it's absolutely everything. The kingdom reveals itself only to those who seek it for itself, not for what it can provide. If these challenges are helping you understand kingdom consciousness more deeply and honestly, like to support this teaching, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment which obstacle you're ready to recognize through with completely new awareness. Let me share an advanced application Joel taught for relationships and conflict. When facing interpersonal conflict, most people try desperately to change the other person or protect themselves from harm. Kingdom consciousness approaches conflict completely differently. You recognize that the other person is also kingdom consciousness appearing in form, even if they don't know it themselves. This doesn't mean accepting harmful behavior or allowing yourself to be abused. It means seeing through the behavior to the consciousness beneath it. Joel discovered that when you hold this recognition steadily, without trying to change anything or anyone, conflict often dissolves naturally. Not because you manipulated it spiritually, but because kingdom recognizing itself in both people creates space for truth to emerge. He had a student whose business partner was apparently defrauding him of thousands of dollars. Every lawyer he consulted advised immediate aggressive legal action. Instead, Joel taught him to recognize kingdom consciousness as the true identity of both partners, not denying the fraud, not pretending it wasn't happening, but seeing beyond it to spiritual reality underneath appearances. The student practiced this recognition faithfully for 3 weeks, never confronting his partner, never taking legal action, just recognizing kingdom consciousness as their shared reality. What happened shocked everyone involved. The partner voluntarily came to him, confessed everything completely, made full restitution without being asked. and the business relationship transformed into something far more honest and successful than it had ever been before. Kingdom consciousness also completely transforms how you relate to your physical body. Most people see their body as a vulnerable material thing that consciousness somehow inhabits temporarily. Kingdom understanding reverses this entirely. Consciousness doesn't inhabit the body. The body is consciousness expressing itself in visible form. Your true body is spiritual and completely indestructible. Joel wasn't denying that we have physical forms or suggesting we ignore symptoms and refuse medical treatment. He was revealing that the physical form is the effect of consciousness, not the cause of anything. When you recognize consciousness as the kingdom, that recognition begins expressing itself as body harmony. Not always instantly, but consistently and progressively over time. He taught people to stop monitoring symptoms constantly, which only reinforces material consciousness and gives power to appearances. Instead, recognize the kingdom several times daily, then trust completely that consciousness is maintaining its own expression as your form. This isn't Christian Science denial of matter. It's mystical recognition of what's truly real versus what only appears real. One student had experienced chronic, debilitating pain for 7 years. Multiple doctors offered no real solution. After learning kingdom recognition from Joel, she spent 3 months simply recognizing consciousness as her true nature, not trying to heal anything, not focusing on pain at all. The pain gradually diminished week by week, then disappeared completely. Doctors found no medical explanation. Joel knew the explanation was consciousness recognizing itself as the only reality. Here's how kingdom consciousness applies practically to work and finances. The human approach is simple. Effort creates results. Work hard, earn money, achieve security through human activity. Kingdom consciousness sees it completely differently. Consciousness expressing itself as your unique talents and purpose naturally attracts whatever is needed for consciousness to fulfill its intention through you. This sounds dangerously impractical until you understand what Joel actually meant. He wasn't suggesting you stop working or become passive waiting for money to fall from sky. He was revealing that when you recognize the kingdom as your source, your work becomes grace expressing itself instead of human striving. You still take action, but action flows naturally from recognition rather than from fear or lack. Joel himself demonstrated this principle throughout his entire ministry. He never advertised his classes, never promoted himself or his books, never asked anyone for money. Yet people came from around the entire world to study with him. Publishers sought him out. His books sold millions of copies. He recognized consciousness as infinite supply, and supply appeared in forms he never could have planned or manipulated. You can apply this starting immediately. Before work each day, recognize the kingdom for 5 minutes. Throughout your workday, pause briefly every hour to remember consciousness as your true nature. Watch carefully how your experience of work transforms. Not necessarily the tasks themselves, but your relationship to them and the unexpected opportunities that begin appearing naturally. Kingdom consciousness also reveals profound truth about death and immortality. Most people fear death as the absolute end of existence. Some religious people hope for heaven as reward after death. Joel taught something completely different based on direct mystical experience. Consciousness, which is the kingdom, is eternal and has no beginning or ending. What we call death is simply consciousness, withdrawing from one particular form. But consciousness itself never dies. When you recognize the kingdom as your true nature, the fear of death loses its power completely. Not because you're convinced intellectually of an afterlife, but because you know yourself directly as consciousness itself, which has no beginning or ending. This isn't a comforting belief. It's direct recognition of what you actually are underneath the appearance of being a temporary body. Joel had many students facing terminal diagnoses who came to him seeking healing. He never promised physical healing or suggested that death was failure. Instead, he taught them to recognize kingdom consciousness as their true identity beyond the body. Many experienced complete physical healing. Others transitioned peacefully, completely free from fear, knowing themselves as eternal consciousness, simply taking off one temporary form. This is perhaps the ultimate gift of kingdom understanding. You discover that what you truly are cannot be threatened by anything whatsoever. Circumstances come and go. Bodies are born and eventually die. But consciousness, the kingdom, remains eternally itself. When you know this directly through recognition, not as belief but as living experience, you're absolutely free from the fear that dominates most human lives. Now let's explore how kingdom consciousness handles what appears as evil or injustice in the world. This troubled Joel deeply for years. If the kingdom is perfect and already present, why does evil appear? Why do innocent people suffer? His answer revolutionizes how you respond to darkness. Evil has no existence in the kingdom. It exists only in the world of human belief and material appearances. When you recognize kingdom consciousness, you're not denying that harmful things appear to happen. You're recognizing that appearances are not reality. The kingdom knows only good, only God, only love. This recognition doesn't change facts instantly, but it changes your relationship to facts completely. Joel taught that meeting evil with kingdom recognition is infinitely more powerful than fighting evil with human effort and force. When you recognize the kingdom where evil doesn't exist, that recognition becomes a light-dissolving darkness. Not metaphorically, literally. Consciousness recognizing its own perfection dissolves the false belief in evil's power. He had countless examples of this. A student facing a violent attacker who recognized kingdom consciousness and watched the attacker walk away confused. Another student whose business faced destructive competition who recognized the kingdom and watched competitors become cooperative partners. This isn't magic. It's consciousness recognizing itself where only itself exists. Kingdom consciousness also transforms how you experience time itself. Most people live trapped in psychological time, constantly worrying about future or regretting past. The kingdom exists only in the eternal now. When you recognize consciousness, you're automatically in the present moment because consciousness has no past or future. Joel discovered that most problems exist only in psychological time. You worry about money that might run out in the future. You fear disease that might develop. You regret mistakes from the past. But in this actual moment, in pure presence, most problems don't exist. The kingdom is always now, and in the now, consciousness is always complete. This doesn't mean ignoring practical planning. It means recognizing that the kingdom supplies whatever is needed in each moment as each moment arrives. You plan wisely, but don't live in anxious future projection. You learn from the past, but don't live in regretful past identification. You live in kingdom consciousness now, trusting that now is always provided for. One student constantly worried about retirement decades away. The worry destroyed his present peace completely. Joel taught him to recognize the kingdom now, trusting that consciousness would provide whatever was needed when that future moment arrived as now. The student practiced this for 6 months. Not only did his present peace return, but opportunities appeared that made his financial future secure beyond what worry could have created. Let's address what happens when kingdom recognition seems to fail. When you recognize consciousness faithfully, but circumstances don't change or even worsen. Joel was honest about this challenging experience that every serious student faces eventually. Sometimes delay happens for reasons beyond our understanding. Sometimes our recognition isn't yet deep enough. Sometimes the challenge is necessary for deeper understanding to develop. Joel taught that you must never judge kingdom recognition by immediate results. The temptation is to treat spirituality as a vending machine. Put in recognition, get out healing. But consciousness operates by grace and wisdom, not human timetables. What seems like delay might be divine timing. What seems like failure might be redirecting you towards something better than you imagined. He told a powerful story of a woman who recognized kingdom consciousness faithfully for her marriage for 2 years, with no apparent improvement. She felt like a complete failure spiritually. Then suddenly her husband's heart opened completely, and their marriage became more beautiful than ever before. Later he told her something shifted in him exactly when she had wanted to quit recognizing truth. The key is recognizing kingdom consciousness because it's true, not because it produces results you want. When you recognize truth for itself, results follow naturally even if delayed. When you recognize truth only to get results, you're not really recognizing kingdom consciousness at all. You're trying to use spirituality for human purposes, and that never works. So what happens when you truly understand what the kingdom of God is? Everything changes, yet nothing changes. You're still in the same body, same circumstances, same world, but you're experiencing it all from kingdom consciousness instead of human limitation. Problems still appear, but they don't have the same power. Challenges arise, but they don't destroy your peace. Death approaches, but it doesn't create fear. You've discovered your true identity as consciousness itself, not the limited human you believed yourself to be, not a powerless victim of circumstances, but kingdom consciousness appearing in temporary human form. This recognition becomes your permanent home, your constant refuge, your unshakable foundation. Joel's final gift to humanity was proving that kingdom consciousness isn't reserved for special people or spiritual masters. It's your birthright. It's what you already are. You don't become kingdom consciousness through years of practice. You recognize what you've always been, but never noticed. This is the moment of recognition. Right now, the awareness reading these words is the kingdom, not the thoughts about the words, the awareness itself. That awareness is untouched by everything it witnesses. That awareness is your true nature. That awareness is God expressing as you. Welcome home to the kingdom you never left. If your spiritual understanding has been completely transformed by these Joel Goldsmith revelations about the kingdom, like this video so others can discover this truth. Subscribe for more life-changing mystical Christianity teachings, and comment, "I am Kingdom Consciousness," to declare your recognition of what you truly are.
There's a moment that changes everything. A moment when the whispers you've been ignoring suddenly become impossible to silence. A moment when you stop asking why me and start understanding, of course, me. That moment is when you truly comprehend that you are chosen. Not chosen because you're perfect. Not chosen because you have it all figured out. Chosen because there's something ancient and eternal woven into the fabric of your soul, something that existed before you took your first breath and will continue long after your last. You are chosen because the universe, God, the divine intelligence that orchestrates galaxies and designs snowflakes, looked at the cosmic tapestry and said, "This thread, this specific thread is essential." But here's what most people don't tell you: understanding that you're chosen isn't a gentle awakening. It's a detonation. It's the demolition of every false identity you've constructed, every limiting belief you've harbored, every small dream you've settled for. When you truly grasp that you are chosen, everything changes. Your thoughts change. Your energy changes. Your relationships change. Your entire trajectory shifts in ways that can feel both exhilarating and terrifying. This isn't about ego. This isn't about being better than anyone else. Every person on this planet has a unique purpose, but not everyone is chosen for the specific mission you carry. Being chosen means you've been selected for a particular assignment that requires your exact combination of gifts, wounds, experiences, and consciousness. It means you can't hide anymore. You can't play small anymore. You can't pretend you don't hear the call anymore. So what actually happens when this truth penetrates not just your mind, but your bones? What shifts in the invisible realms of your being? What doors close and what portals open? Let's dive deep into the transformation that occurs when you finally stop resisting and start embracing the reality that you are without question chosen. The awakening, recognizing you are chosen. The recognition doesn't usually come as a single lightning bolt moment, though for some it does. More often, it's a series of unmistakable signs that compound until denial becomes impossible. You start noticing patterns. Synchronicities multiply. You see repeating numbers constantly: 11, 11, 333, 4, 44. Like the universe is sending you coded messages. You have vivid dreams that feel more real than waking life. Dreams where you're being prepared, trained, shown things that haven't happened yet. People you've never met tell you things about yourself that they couldn't possibly know. Strangers are drawn to you, wanting to share their deepest struggles within minutes of meeting you. But it's more than external signs. Something internal begins to stir, knowing that you can't rationalize or explain. You feel ancient, as if you've lived 1,000 lives. You look at the chaos of the world, and instead of feeling helpless, you feel called. There's a magnetic pull towards something greater, something that makes your ordinary life feel like a costume you're ready to shed. You become increasingly uncomfortable with superficial conversations, toxic environments, and anything that doesn't align with truth. Your tolerance for fakeness evaporates. You can feel people's energy before they speak. You know things without knowing how you know them. Your intuition becomes so sharp it's almost painful, showing you the reality beneath surface appearances. This awakening phase is disorienting because you're operating with one foot in the old world where you tried to fit in, and one foot in the new world where you're being called to stand out. You're grieving the death of who you thought you were while simultaneously feeling the birth pangs of who you're becoming. You thought understanding you're chosen would make you feel special, but instead it makes you feel the weight of responsibility. You realize being chosen isn't a reward, it's a commission. The moment you stop fighting this recognition, something cracks open inside you. It's as if your soul, which has been compressed into a tiny box labeled normal, suddenly expands to fill the space it was always meant to occupy. You breathe differently, you walk differently. There's a knowing in your eyes that wasn't there before. People sense it even if they can't name it. Some are drawn to your new frequency. Others instinctively recoil, as light always disturbs those comfortable in darkness. And here's the critical part. Once you recognize you're chosen, there's no going back to sleep. You can try to ignore it, suppress it, numb it with distractions, but the knowing remains. It's burned into your consciousness now. The call has been heard, and whether you answer it immediately or resist for years, your life will never be the same. The death of your old identity. When you truly accept that you're chosen, your old identity doesn't gently fade, it gets violently dismantled. This is the crucible phase, and it's where most people panic and try to retreat back to familiarity. The person you thought you were begins to die. That carefully constructed persona you built to win approval, avoid rejection, and navigate societal expectations, it starts crumbling. The career that once seemed so important suddenly feels hollow. The goals you've been chasing lose their magnetism. The social circles you invested in feel suffocating. Everything that gave you a sense of identity and security becomes unstable. This isn't depression, though it can feel similar. This is the necessary destruction that precedes reconstruction. You're being stripped down to your essence, to the raw material of your soul, so you can be rebuilt according to your divine blueprint rather than society's mold. Your ego rebels during this phase because its survival depends on the old identity. It will generate fear, doubt, and confusion. It will remind you of every failure, every rejection, every reason you should stay small. Your mind will create elaborate justifications for why you should return to normal. Well-meaning friends and family will tell you you're changing, and not in a complimentary way. They liked the old you, the predictable, manageable, controllable version. This new you, the one awakening to their chosen nature, threatens the unspoken contracts you had with people. You'll lose people during this death phase, not because they're bad people, but because they're attached to who you were, not who you're becoming. Some relationships will end dramatically, others will just fade, dissolving like mist when the sun rises, and it will hurt. You'll grieve friendships, relationships, family dynamics. You'll mourn the loss of your old dreams, even the ones that were never truly yours. But here's what's happening beneath the surface. You're being purged. Every false belief is being burned away. Every limitation is being exposed as the lie it always was. Every fear-based decision pattern is being highlighted so you can see how much of your life was built on avoiding pain rather than pursuing purpose. The old you dies. The version who needed external validation dies. The version who apologized for existing dies. The version who dimmed their light to make others comfortable dies. The version who believed they were ordinary, unremarkable, just another face in the crowd, that version doesn't survive the recognition of being chosen. And in that death, in that terrifying void where you no longer know who you are, something miraculous happens. You discover who you've always been. Beneath every layer of conditioning, trauma, and social programming, there's an unshakable core, a divine spark, an assignment written in the stars before you were born. This is what emerges from the ashes of your old identity. This is the you that was always meant to exist. The activation, what changes inside you once you move through the death phase and accept your chosen status. An activation occurs, a fundamental recalibration of your entire being. Your thought patterns transform first. Where you once operated from lack, you now operate from abundance. Where you once thought, I hope this works out, you now think this is already done. Your mind stops generating worst-case scenarios and starts receiving downloads of creative solutions. You think bigger because you understand your thoughts are creating your reality, and you've been chosen to create something specific. Your internal dialogue shifts from criticism to compassion, from doubt to certainty. When challenges arise, instead of why is this happening to me, you ask what is this teaching me, or how is this preparing me? You recognize that obstacles aren't roadblocks, but redirections, refining processes, opportunities for growth. Your emotional body undergoes a radical transformation. You develop an unshakable inner peace that isn't dependent on external circumstances, not because life becomes easy, but because you're rooted in something deeper than circumstance. You can be in the storm without being of the storm. Anxiety loses its grip because you trust the process. Fear still visits, but it no longer lives in you. You feel emotions more deeply, both joy and pain, but you're no longer controlled by them. Your intuition becomes your primary navigation system. That quiet inner voice that you used to second-guess now takes precedence over logic, over other people's opinions, over conventional wisdom. You make decisions that don't make sense to others but are perfectly aligned with your path. You say no to good opportunities because you're holding out for great ones. You say yes to things that terrify you because you feel the soul pull toward them. Spiritually, you experience a profound alignment. Prayer shifts from begging to conversation. Meditation moves from technique to communion. You feel connected to source energy in a tangible way. You might develop abilities you didn't have before heightened. Perception, healing presence, prophetic dreams, an ability to shift energy in spaces you enter. These aren't party tricks, they're tools for your mission. Physically, your energy changes. People notice it even if they can't articulate what's different. You carry yourself with more authority, not from arrogance but from alignment. Your health might improve as you release stored trauma and stress from your body. You require less sleep but have more energy. You're drawn to different foods, different environments, different practices that support your elevated frequency. Your relationship with time transforms. You stop living reactively and start living intentionally. Every day has purpose. You understand that your time is your most valuable resource and you become fiercely protective of it. You also experience time differently, moments of flow where hours pass like minutes, and moments where a single instant contains eternity. Most significantly, you develop an unshakable knowing, not belief, not hope, not positive thinking, but knowing. You know you're protected. You know you're guided. You know that what's meant for you cannot miss you. You know your steps are ordered. You know you're equipped for whatever comes. This knowing becomes your foundation, the bedrock that remains steady when everything else is shaking. How your relationships transform. When you understand you're chosen, your entire relational world reorganizes itself according to new frequencies and alignments. First, there's the great falling away. People you thought would be in your life forever exit, sometimes abruptly. Friendships that survived years dissolve in weeks. Family relationships become strained or distant. This isn't punishment, it's protection. These individuals represent energies, beliefs, and patterns that can't coexist with where you're going. They anchor you to who you were, and staying connected would mean staying stuck. Some people will exit with drama betrayals, arguments, painful endings. Others simply drift away, the connection fading without clear explanation. Both hurt, but both are necessary. You're learning that not everyone is meant to go where you're going. Your journey requires you to travel light, and some relationships are heavy baggage disguised as loyalty. You'll also experience the phenomenon of people becoming intimidated by you without you doing anything to intimidate them. Your presence becomes unsettling to those living in denial, pretense, or fear. Your authenticity highlights their masks. Your courage exposes their comfort zones. Your growth reflects their stagnation. They'll project onto you, calling you changed, different, too much, too spiritual, arrogant, when really you're just becoming more yourself. But as people fall away, new connections emerge that feel like soul recognition. You meet people, and within minutes it feels like you've known them forever. Conversations go deep immediately. There's no small talk, no pretense, just raw authenticity and mutual recognition. These are your spiritual family, your soul tribe. They're often scattered across the world, connected by frequency rather than proximity. These new relationships operate differently. There's no game playing, no manipulation, no hidden agendas. You communicate clearly. You hold each other accountable. You celebrate wins without jealousy. You navigate conflicts with maturity. These connections don't drain you, they energize you. They don't compete with you, they collaborate with you. Your standards for relationships become non-negotiable. You no longer tolerate disrespect, dishonesty, or dysfunction, even from family. You create boundaries that might seem harsh to others, but are essential for your well-being. You're no longer available for relationships where you have to shrink, explain, or apologize for your growth. Even your romantic relationships transform. If you're in a partnership that can't accommodate your evolution, it will either end or fundamentally change. Your partner will either rise to meet your frequency or reveal they can't. If you're single, you become unavailable for surface-level connections. You'd rather be alone than poorly accompanied. When the right person appears, it's unmistakable a recognition rather than a pursuit. You also develop a new relationship with yourself, one of deep acceptance and fierce protection. You become your own best friend, your own biggest advocate. You stop abandoning yourself to please others. You honor your needs, your boundaries, your inner guidance. This self-relationship becomes the model for all external relationships. Living with purpose, your new daily reality. When you truly understand you're chosen, your daily life becomes an expression of purpose rather than a series of random activities and obligations. Your decision-making process fundamentally changes. Every choice is filtered through the question, does this align with my purpose? Not will this make me happy, or what will people think, but is this part of my assignment? This clarity eliminates the paralysis of endless options. You say no easily and frequently, not from a place of negativity, but from a place of focus. You stop waiting for permission, from parents, from society, from credentials, from anyone. You understand that being chosen is all the permission you need. You launch the business before you feel ready. You share the message before you feel qualified. You step into leadership before you feel confident. You trust that the path reveals itself as you walk it. Fear no longer stops you, it becomes a compass. When you feel afraid of something that aligns with your purpose, you move toward it rather than away from it. You recognize fear as an indicator that you're at the edge of your growth zone. You become comfortable being uncomfortable because that's where transformation happens. Signs and synchronicities become daily occurrences. You need a specific piece of information, and someone sends you an article about it. You think of someone, and they call. You need resources, and they appear from unexpected sources. You're considering a decision, and confirmation comes through multiple channels. You learn to read the language of the universe, to interpret the signs, to follow the breadcrumbs. Your work becomes worship. Whatever you do, whether it's traditionally spiritual or seemingly mundane, becomes an offering. You understand that your chosen status isn't just about a single dramatic mission, but about infusing every moment with purpose. The way you interact with a cashier, the quality of your work, the energy you bring to your home, all of it matters. You develop a practice of consistent alignment. Morning routines become sacred. You protect your peace with intentional practices, meditation, prayer, movement, creation. You understand that maintaining your frequency is essential to fulfilling your purpose. You can't pour from an empty cup, so you become obsessive about staying full. Challenges arise differently. Instead of problems, you see assignments. Instead of obstacles, you see opportunities for testimony. When things fall apart, you look for what's being rearranged. When doors close, you trust better ones are opening. You stop forcing and start flowing. You hold your plans loosely, understanding that divine timing is always better than your timing. Your impact expands in ways you couldn't have orchestrated. The right people find your message. Opportunities appear that you didn't apply for. Resources arrive without you having to beg or manipulate. You realize you're not building your purpose. You're stewarding it. The work has a life of its own, and you're the vessel through which it flows. You live with radical integrity. Your private life matches your public persona. Your words align with your actions. Your values aren't negotiable. You do the right thing even when no one's watching, even when it costs you because you answer to a higher authority than human opinion. The challenges and tests understanding you're chosen doesn't exempt you from difficulty. It often intensifies it. Your tests become more sophisticated, your challenges more complex, because you're being prepared for greater assignments. Spiritual warfare increases. Not everyone in the visible and invisible realms wants you to fulfill your purpose. You'll experience attacks on your peace, your focus, your relationships, your resources. Things will break that shouldn't break. Delays will occur that make no logical sense. Attacks will come from unexpected sources. This isn't paranoia, it's the reality that light attracts opposition. You learn to put on spiritual armor daily, to guard your mind, to stay prayed up. Periods of isolation become common and necessary. There will be seasons where you feel completely alone, even in a crowd. Seasons where no one understands what you're going through. Seasons where God feels distant and your purpose feels uncertain. These wilderness experiences aren't abandonment, they're refinement. You're being taught to hear the voice of guidance above all other voices, including your own. Doubt will visit, sometimes daily. Not the doubt of unbelievers, but the doubt that whispers, "Did you imagine this? Did you misinterpret the signs? Are you delusional?" This doubt is part of the journey. You learn to acknowledge it without being controlled by it. You develop a file of remembrance journals, past confirmations, testimonies that you review when doubt screams loudest. Financial tests often accompany being chosen. You might lose income sources. Opportunities might dry up temporarily. You're being taught to trust divine provision over human strategy. You're learning that your source isn't your job, your business, or your talent. Your source is source. These tests build your faith muscles and break any lingering attachment to security systems that could become idols. Relationship tests continue even after the initial falling away. People will test your boundaries repeatedly. New people will appear who seem aligned but are actually distractions or Trojan horses. You'll be tempted to go back to old relationships that were comfortable but toxic. Each test strengthens your discernment and deepens your commitment to divine alignment over human approval. Your faith will be tested in fire. You'll pray for things and see the opposite happen initially. You'll step out in obedience and face immediate resistance. You'll declare promises and watch circumstances contradict them. This isn't God lying to you, it's the test that comes before the testimony. The question is always, will you trust what you've been shown more than what you currently see? The temptation to quit will be real. There will be moments when going back to normal life seems not just easier, but smarter. When your purpose feels too heavy, your calling too costly, your assignment too impossible. These are the moments that separate the called from the chosen. Everyone is called, but only those who endure the testing walk fully in their chosen status. The responsibility of being chosen. So what? Now. Now that you understand you're chosen, what happens next? You accept the responsibility that comes with recognition. Being chosen means you don't get to play victim anymore. You don't get to blame circumstances, parents, society, or the enemy for an unfulfilled life. You've been given revelation, and with revelation comes accountability. What you do with this knowing determines not just your destiny, but the destinies connected to yours. You must stay surrendered. Chosen doesn't mean perfect. You'll still make mistakes, still have moments of weakness, still fall short. The difference is you don't stay down. You repent quickly, adjust rapidly, and keep moving. Your power isn't in never failing, it's in how quickly you get back up. You must guard your assignment. Everything you've learned in this journey, the transformation, the activation, the challenges, it's all preparation for something specific. You carry something the world needs. A message, a solution, a frequency, a demonstration of what's possible. Don't take this lightly. Don't let distractions, offenses, or the applause of people pull you off course. You must stay connected to Source. Your chosen status isn't about you being special, it's about you being usable. The moment you disconnect from the power source, you're just running on fumes. Daily communion, constant surrender, continual alignment, these aren't optional for the chosen. They're essential. You must walk in love. Being chosen can make you feel set apart, and you are but never above. Your elevation is for service, not superiority. You're chosen to lift others, to light the path, to demonstrate what's possible when someone fully surrenders to their divine assignment. Stay humble, stay teachable, stay accessible. The world is waiting for you to fully step into your chosen status, not the version of you that hesitates, apologizes, or plays small. The world needs you awakened, activated, and walking in authority. Children need to see it. Communities need to experience it. Generations need to inherit it. You are chosen, not by accident, not randomly, specifically, intentionally, purposefully chosen. Before you were formed in the womb, you were known. Before you took your first breath, you were assigned. Everything you've been through, the pain, the preparation, the process, it's all been orchestrating this moment. So stop asking if you're chosen. You know you are. The question is, will you live like it? Will you make decisions from that identity? Will you speak with that authority? Will you move with that confidence? Will you love with that fearlessness? Will you create with that boldness? The world doesn't need more people wondering if they're chosen. The world needs people who know they're chosen and live accordingly, without apology, without hesitation, without shrinking. You are chosen. Now go be what you were created to be. The time is now. Your moment is here, your assignment is waiting, and everything you need to fulfill it is already within you. Walk in it, live it, breathe it, be it. You are chosen.
Most people celebrate Christmas as a historical event that happened 2,000 years ago. But Joel Goldsmith revealed something that changes everything. The birth of Christ is not just history. It's a mystical experience that must happen within your own consciousness right now. This isn't metaphor. It's the most practical spiritual truth you'll ever encounter. The birth of Christ within you means the awakening of divine consciousness in your awareness, not as something you gain, but as what you already are beneath the layers of human conditioning. When this Christ consciousness is born in you, every limitation you've accepted as real begins to dissolve. Your health, relationships, finances, they all reflect this inner transformation. This is why Joel taught that the Christmas story is your story. Mary represents your receptive consciousness. The stable represents humility. The star represents illumination. Every element points to an inner experience of spiritual awakening that's available to you today, not through belief, but through direct recognition of your true nature as spiritual consciousness. Here's what Joel Goldsmith understood that most spiritual teachers miss. Christ is not a person. Christ is the infinite consciousness of God expressing as individual being. When you truly grasp this, you stop looking outside yourself for salvation. You recognize that the very consciousness reading these words right now is the presence of God in expression. The birth happens when you stop identifying with the limited human self and recognize your true identity as spiritual consciousness, not through affirmation or visualization, but through a shift in perception. Joel called this recognition, not treatment. You're not trying to become spiritual. You're recognizing what's already true. This recognition changes how you face every challenge. When illness appears, you don't fight the illness. You recognize the Christ consciousness within that knows no disease. When lack appears, you don't struggle for supply. You recognize the infinite abundance that's already present in consciousness. This is the practical power of understanding Christ's birth within you. Let me be clear about what happens in the moment of recognition. Robert was a businessman facing bankruptcy. For months he'd been affirming, visualizing, and treating for prosperity. Nothing changed. Then during meditation, something shifted. He stopped trying to change his circumstances and simply recognized, I am consciousness. I am the presence of God individualized. In that moment, the birth of Christ happened within Robert. Not dramatic, not emotional, just a quiet recognition of truth. Within 3 weeks, unexpected opportunities appeared. A former client returned with a major contract. A debt he'd written off was suddenly repaid. But more importantly, his relationship with money transformed completely. This is how the birth of Christ within works. It's not magic. It's not wishing. It's a fundamental shift in identity from human being with problems to spiritual consciousness expressing as individual life. When this shift occurs, the outer world rearranges itself to reflect your true nature. Not because you forced it, but because consciousness creates experience. Joel Goldsmith emphasized that this birth must happen in silence. You can't think your way into it. You can't affirm your way into it. You must become still enough to recognize what's already present. The Christ within you doesn't need to be created or attracted. It needs to be discovered through the cessation of mental striving. This is why traditional prayer often fails. When you pray to God for something, you're reinforcing the belief that you're separate from God. But when the Christ is born within your consciousness, you recognize that you and the Father are one. Not in the future, not after more spiritual work. Right now, in this eternal moment of recognition. The practical application is simple but profound. Before facing any situation today, pause. Don't think about solutions. Don't plan strategies. Simply recognize. The Christ consciousness within me knows the way. I don't need to figure this out. I need to be still and let divine wisdom reveal itself through my awareness. This is the secret Joel spent his life teaching. Barbara had suffered from chronic pain for 12 years. She'd tried every medical treatment, every alternative therapy, every positive thinking technique. Nothing provided lasting relief. Then she attended a Joel Goldsmith class and heard about the birth of Christ within. At first she thought it was just religious symbolism, but the teacher explained it differently. The teacher said that Christ consciousness knows no pain because it's not body consciousness. It's the awareness that exists before the body and will exist after. When Barbara sat in meditation and stopped identifying with her painful body, something remarkable occurred. She recognized herself as consciousness observing the body, not as the body itself. This recognition didn't make the pain disappear instantly, but over the following weeks, as she practiced resting in Christ consciousness rather than body consciousness, the pain gradually diminished. Not because she fought it, but because her identity shifted. 6 months later, she was pain-free. Not through healing the body, but through recognizing she was never the body to begin with. William faced a crisis in his marriage. His wife was distant, communication had broken down, and divorce seemed inevitable. He prayed desperately for God to fix his marriage. Nothing changed. Then he discovered Joel's teaching about the birth of Christ within and realized he'd been approaching everything wrong. Instead of praying for his wife to change, William began recognizing the Christ consciousness in himself. He stopped seeing himself as a wounded husband and started recognizing his true identity as divine love in expression. This wasn't positive thinking. It was a fundamental shift in how he perceived himself and his wife. As William's consciousness transformed, something unexpected happened. His wife began responding differently to him, not because he manipulated her, but because he was expressing from a different level of consciousness. Within 3 months, their marriage had transformed. But the real miracle was that William no longer needed his wife to be different for him to experience peace and wholeness. Here's what Joel Goldsmith taught about financial challenges. When you experience lack, you're not experiencing a problem with money. You're experiencing a problem with consciousness. Money is simply the outer form of an inner awareness of abundance. When Christ consciousness is born within you, you recognize that supply flows from consciousness, not from circumstances. Daniel was unemployed for 8 months. His savings were gone, bills were overdue, and fear dominated his thoughts. Then he began practicing recognition instead of petition. Instead of begging God for a job, he sat quietly recognizing, I am consciousness. Consciousness is infinite and complete. My supply comes from within, not from external sources. This practice wasn't easy at first. Fear would interrupt. Doubt would arise. But Daniel persisted in returning to recognition. Within 2 weeks, he received a call about a position he'd applied 4 months earlier. The job paid significantly more than his previous one. But more importantly, his relationship with money had fundamentally transformed through the birth of Christ consciousness within. The birth of Christ within you is not a one-time event. It's a daily practice of recognition. Every morning before you engage with the world's problems and demands, you must return to this truth. You are not a human being trying to be spiritual. You are spiritual consciousness expressing as individual being. This recognition transforms everything. When challenges appear today, don't ask God to fix them. Recognize the Christ within that already knows the solution. When fear arises, don't fight it. Recognize the consciousness that exists before fear and remains untouched by it. When you need guidance, don't seek it outside. Become still and let the Christ within reveal divine wisdom through your awareness. This is the practical mysticism Joel Goldsmith taught. It's not religion. It's not philosophy. It's a way of living from your true identity as divine consciousness. And when you live from this recognition, miracles become natural, not because you create them, but because you recognize what's already present in spiritual reality. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others discover this mystical truth. Subscribe for more. Joel Goldsmith Wisdom, and comment. Which story resonated most deeply with your own spiritual journey? Beyond recognition, Joel taught a complementary practice called impersonalization. When someone appears to harm you or when a problem seems to threaten your well-being, you must impersonalize it. This means recognizing that no person, condition, or circumstance has power over consciousness. The birth of Christ within makes you aware that only consciousness is power. When Nancy's business partner betrayed her and stole clients, her first reaction was anger and revenge. But she remembered Joel's teaching about impersonalization. She recognized that her partner wasn't the source of her supply. Consciousness was. No human action could truly threaten what consciousness provides. Nancy practiced sitting in silence, recognizing that her true identity as Christ consciousness remained untouched by this betrayal. She didn't deny the human pain. She didn't suppress her feelings, but she refused to give the situation power over her sense of wholeness. Within months, her business had recovered and grown beyond its previous success, with clients who truly valued her work. Another powerful technique Joel taught is the practice of nothingizing. When a problem appears, whether it's disease, lack, or conflict, you recognize it as nothing in the realm of spiritual reality, not by denying its human appearance, but by understanding that spiritual consciousness knows no such limitations. Kevin was diagnosed with a serious heart condition. Doctors recommended immediate surgery. Fear gripped him completely. Then he remembered Joel's teaching about nothingizing. He sat quietly and recognized, in Christ consciousness, there is no disease. Disease is something appearing in the realm of material sense, but it has no reality in spiritual truth. This wasn't denial of the diagnosis. This was recognition of a deeper truth. Kevin continued working with his doctors while daily practicing nothingizing the fear and limitation. He recognized that his true self as consciousness couldn't be sick. Over the following months, his condition improved dramatically. The surgery was no longer necessary. His doctors called it spontaneous improvement. Kevin knew it was consciousness revealing its true nature. Joel Goldsmith also taught the practice of witnessing. Instead of being caught up in the drama of human experience, you step back and witness it from consciousness. You observe your thoughts, emotions, and circumstances without identifying with them. This is what happens when Christ is born within. You realize you're the witness, not the witnessed. Melissa struggled with anxiety for years. Every day brought new worries about health, finances, and relationships. Then she learned to practice witnessing. During meditation, instead of fighting anxious thoughts, she simply observed them arising and passing. She recognized herself as the consciousness witnessing these thoughts, not as the thoughts themselves. This practice transformed Melissa's experience of anxiety. The thoughts still appeared sometimes, but they no longer controlled her. She could watch them arise, recognize them as just thoughts, and let them pass without getting caught in their story. Within weeks, her anxiety had diminished significantly. Not because she fought it, but because she'd found her true identity as the witness, the Christ consciousness that remains peaceful, regardless of what appears. The practice of conscious awareness is perhaps Joel's most direct teaching. Throughout your day, pause frequently and ask yourself, am I living as human being or as spiritual consciousness? Am I reacting from personality or responding from presence? These moments of checking your consciousness become the birth canal through which Christ is continuously born in your awareness. Timothy was a corporate executive under enormous pressure. Deadlines, demanding clients, office politics. He felt constantly overwhelmed. Then he began practicing conscious awareness. Every hour he'd pause for 30 seconds and recognize, I am not this stressed executive. I am the consciousness witnessing this experience. I am the presence of peace itself. These brief pauses throughout the day transformed Timothy's entire experience. He found himself responding to challenges with unexpected wisdom. Solutions appeared where before he'd seen only problems. Relationships improved because he wasn't reacting from stress. His productivity actually increased because he was operating from a clearer consciousness. The Christ within had been born through his practice of continuous recognition. But let's be honest about the challenges. The biggest obstacle to experiencing the birth of Christ within is your own mind. Your thoughts will tell you this is too simple. Your intellect will demand more complex techniques. Your ego will insist you need to do something more, achieve something more, become something more before this truth can be real for you. Amanda practiced recognition faithfully for weeks, but felt nothing. No blissful experiences, no dramatic insights, no instant miracles. She began to doubt. Maybe this worked for others, but not for her. Maybe she wasn't spiritual enough. Maybe her problems were too big for this simple practice of recognition. These thoughts nearly caused her to quit entirely. Then Amanda realized these doubts were exactly what Joel warned about. The human mind will always resist the simplicity of truth. It wants complexity because complexity keeps the ego in control. She persisted despite the doubts, continuing to recognize Christ consciousness within even when it felt like nothing was happening. And gradually, almost imperceptibly, everything began to change. Another challenge is impatience. You practice recognition for a few days or weeks and expect complete transformation. But Joel emphasized that consciousness work is like planting seeds. You don't dig up the seed every day to check if it's growing. You plant it, water it, and trust the process. The birth of Christ within unfolds in its own timing, not according to your human schedule. Brian wanted immediate results. He practiced recognition for 2 weeks, saw no dramatic changes, and concluded it didn't work. He went back to his old patterns of worry, struggle, and petition prayer. But something had been planted in those 2 weeks. Months later, during a crisis, he suddenly found himself naturally resting in recognition. The seed had been growing all along beneath his awareness. This is crucial to understand. The birth of Christ within isn't always accompanied by fireworks and dramatic experiences. Often it's quiet, gradual, almost imperceptible. You simply find yourself responding differently to life's challenges. You notice peace where before there was anxiety. You discover wisdom where before there was confusion. Trust the process even when you can't see immediate results. The third major challenge is maintaining recognition during intense difficulties. It's easy to recognize Christ consciousness when life is calm. But when crisis hits, when fear is overwhelming, when the situation seems desperate, your mind wants to abandon spiritual practice and return to human problem-solving and panic. Nicole faced this exact challenge when her teenage daughter ran away from home. For 3 days, she had no idea where her daughter was or if she was safe. Every instinct screamed at her to panic, to imagine worst-case scenarios, to blame herself. Instead, she fought to maintain recognition of Christ consciousness within both herself and her daughter. It wasn't easy. Fear would flood her mind repeatedly, but each time Nicole would return to recognition. My daughter is spiritual consciousness. She's never outside God's presence. I trust the Christ within both of us to reveal the solution. On the 4th day, her daughter called. She was safe and ready to come home. But more importantly, Nicole had learned that Christ consciousness remains steady even in the worst human circumstances. Joel taught that resistance to this truth often comes from religious conditioning. If you are taught that Christ is someone external to worship, the idea of Christ within you might feel blasphemous. But this is exactly what the mystics throughout history have taught. You're not claiming to be Jesus the person. You're recognizing Christ, the consciousness that was fully realized in Jesus but exists in all. Dorothy struggled with this for months. Her Christian upbringing made her uncomfortable with claiming Christ identity. It felt arrogant, even dangerous. Then she realized Joel wasn't teaching ego inflation. He was teaching ego dissolution. Recognizing Christ within means recognizing you're not the limited human personality. You're the infinite consciousness that's the same in all. This understanding freed Dorothy from years of spiritual guilt and unworthiness. She stopped seeing herself as a sinner begging God for mercy and started recognizing herself as consciousness itself, expressing as individual being. Her prayer life transformed completely. Instead of petition, she practiced recognition. Instead of begging, she rested. And her entire experience of spirituality shifted from burden to liberation. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this transformative content, subscribe for advanced Joel Goldsmith practices, and comment. Which obstacle you're ready to transform through Christ consciousness now? Now let's explore advanced integration of this teaching. When you truly understand the birth of Christ within, you realize that every person you encounter is also that same consciousness. This transforms all your relationships. You stop seeing others as threats or obstacles and start recognizing them as consciousness in expression, even when their behavior is difficult. Richard managed a team of 15 people. One employee, Anthony, constantly created problems, missed deadlines, and complained about everything. Richard's first impulse was to fire him. Then he remembered Joel's teaching about recognizing Christ in everyone. He began silently acknowledging Anthony's true nature as spiritual consciousness during every interaction. Richard didn't become permissive or stop addressing performance issues, but he approached Anthony from recognition rather than judgment. Within weeks, Anthony's behavior shifted. He became more cooperative and productive. Richard realized that when he'd seen Anthony as a problem employee, Anthony had reflected that consciousness back. When Richard recognized Anthony's divine nature, even silently, Anthony began expressing from that higher level of consciousness. Advanced practice also means recognizing Christ consciousness in the midst of daily activities, not just during meditation. When you're washing dishes, driving to work, or sitting in meetings, you can practice awareness of presence. This constant recognition transforms ordinary life into continuous spiritual practice. The secular becomes sacred when consciousness is recognized. Helen discovered this accidentally. She was stuck in traffic, feeling frustrated and angry. Then she remembered Joel's teaching and asked herself, who is frustrated? She recognized that consciousness itself wasn't frustrated. Only her identification with the limited self created frustration. She rested in that recognition right there in her car, surrounded by honking horns and exhaust fumes. That simple shift changed Helen's entire day. She arrived at work peaceful instead of stressed. She handled challenges with unexpected grace. She noticed beauty she normally overlooked. From that day forward, Helen began using every mundane moment as an opportunity for recognition. Traffic became meditation time. Waiting in lines became practice. Every moment became a chance for Christ consciousness to be born anew. Joel also taught advanced practitioners to recognize divine consciousness operating in what appears to be evil or wrong. This doesn't mean approving harmful behavior. It means understanding that beneath all human evil is consciousness itself, temporarily ignorant of its true nature. When you can see this, you respond to wrongdoing with wisdom rather than revenge. Gary was robbed at gunpoint. His first reaction was terror, then anger, then a desire for revenge. But as he processed the trauma, he remembered Joel's teaching about consciousness being all. He began to recognize that even the robber was consciousness, acting in ignorance of spiritual truth. This didn't excuse the crime, but it freed Gary from being consumed by hatred. Gary cooperated with police and legal processes, but internally he practiced releasing judgment and recognizing spiritual truth. This practice freed him from the trauma surprisingly quickly. He didn't carry fear or anger. He'd recognized that his true self as consciousness couldn't be violated by any human action. And he'd recognized the same truth about the robber, even while holding him accountable in the human dimension. The ultimate advanced practice is living continuously from recognition without effort. At first, you must consciously remember to recognize Christ within. But with consistent practice, recognition becomes your natural state. You no longer have to think about it. You simply live from awareness of spiritual identity. This is the full birth of Christ consciousness, not as occasional experience but as permanent realization. Carol practiced recognition daily for 2 years. Slowly, imperceptibly, something shifted. She realized she was no longer practicing recognition as a technique. She was simply being recognition. Christ consciousness wasn't something she achieved in meditation and lost in daily life. It had become her natural state of awareness, present whether she thought about it or not. This is the goal Joel pointed toward. Not occasional mystical experiences, not temporary states of peace, but permanent transformation of identity from human being to spiritual consciousness. Carol still functioned in the human world, still faced challenges, still experienced emotions, but underneath everything was unshakable recognition of her true nature as the presence of God individualized. This is what Joel meant by the birth of Christ within you. As we approach the end, understand that the birth of Christ within you changes your entire purpose in life. You stop seeking happiness, success, or fulfillment from external circumstances. You recognize that wholeness is your nature, completeness is your identity, and peace is what you are, not what you achieve. This recognition liberates you from the exhausting pursuit of more. Paul had spent 30 years chasing success. Better job, bigger house, more money, higher status. He achieved it all, but felt empty. Then the birth of Christ within showed him he'd been seeking externally what was already present internally. He was already whole. He was already complete. Success hadn't made him spiritual. Recognition of his spiritual nature made success irrelevant to his sense of self. This didn't mean Paul stopped working or achieving, but his motivation transformed completely. He no longer worked to become worthy or whole. He worked as an expression of the wholeness he already was. His career continued successfully, but it no longer defined him. He'd found his true identity as consciousness itself, and everything else became simply the play of that consciousness in form. The birth of Christ within also transforms your understanding of death. When you recognize yourself as consciousness rather than body, death loses its power over you. The body may cease functioning, but consciousness continues. This isn't belief in an afterlife. This is direct recognition that what you truly are never began with birth and can't end with death. Betty faced terminal illness with remarkable peace. When friends asked how she remained so calm, she explained Joel's teaching about consciousness. She'd recognized herself as the awareness that had witnessed her entire life. from childhood through old age. That awareness hadn't aged or sickened. It remained present, clear, and eternal. She wasn't denying the body's condition. She was recognizing her true identity beyond the body. Betty's final months were filled with grace and wisdom. She comforted others instead of needing comfort. She spoke of death as simply a transition of form while consciousness remains. She'd experienced the birth of Christ within so fully that even death couldn't threaten her sense of being. This is the ultimate freedom Joel's teaching offers. Not escape from death, but recognition that what you truly are is deathless consciousness. Finally, understand that sharing this truth with others becomes natural when Christ is born within you. Not through preaching or convincing, but through silent recognition of their true nature. When you see someone struggling, you don't just offer human sympathy. You silently recognize the Christ within them, even when they can't see it themselves. This recognition serves them in ways words never could. Kenneth worked as a counselor. For years, he'd relied on psychology and communication techniques. They helped, but something was missing. After discovering Joel's teaching, he began silently recognizing Christ consciousness in every client before sessions. He didn't mention this practice. He simply held awareness of their spiritual nature while listening to their problems. Kenneth noticed dramatic changes. Clients had breakthroughs more quickly. Solutions appeared naturally. Healing happened at deeper levels. He realized that when he recognized their true nature as spiritual consciousness, he created space for that consciousness to emerge in their awareness. His silent recognition invited the birth of Christ within them. This is the greatest gift you can offer anyone. Not advice or solutions, but recognition of who they truly are. So what happens when you truly understand the birth of Christ within you? Everything changes and nothing changes. The outer circumstances of your life may shift dramatically or may remain similar, but your experience of everything transforms completely. You live from peace instead of anxiety, from wholeness instead of lack, from wisdom instead of confusion. You stop seeking God outside yourself and recognize God as your own consciousness. You stop trying to become spiritual and recognize yourself as spiritual already. You stop fighting problems and start recognizing the consciousness that exists before all problems. This is the practical mysticism Joel Goldsmith taught, not philosophy for intellectual satisfaction, but truth for daily transformation. The birth of Christ within you is available right now, not after more spiritual work, not after solving your problems, not after becoming worthy. Right now, in this moment, you can recognize what you've always been. Consciousness itself, the presence of God individualized, the Christ expressing as you. This recognition is the secret Joel spent his life revealing, and it's the truth that will set you free. If your spiritual understanding expanded through Joel Goldsmith's mystical teachings today, like this video to help others find this truth, subscribe for more transformative wisdom, and comment, Christ consciousness recognized, to confirm your new awareness and spiritual path.